The other day, I was reading a book by the psychoanalyst John Frederickson called Lies We Tell Ourselves, and I came across this passage that just stopped me in my tracks. He said, and I quote, "The medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas once said that we should never submit to another person because in doing so, we invite her to sin." I had to read it again. We, the ones who submit, invite them, those who would have us submit, into sin? It sounded wrong. It sounded like victim blaming. How could my submission encourage or invite or be the reason for your sin? I didn't get it, but I couldn't shake it. And as I turned it over in my mind, I began to see what I think Aquinas was getting at, namely, that power built on submission is fundamentally illusory and corrupting. Illusory because such power only exists if others agree to play along, and corrupting because it invites people to believe a dangerous lie, namely that they are entitled to stand above their fellow human beings. And once they occupy this false position of arbitrary and constructed power, then they find themselves compelled to commit ever greater transgressions in their efforts to keep the illusion alive. In RLT, or relational life therapy, we call the position occupied by controlling or abusive individuals the one-up grandiose position. It's the position that declares, I'm above you, I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you, more powerful than you, therefore I am entitled to control you. But we see that this dynamic itself is a lie. There is no truly one up or one down person. All people have equal intrinsic worth. Superiority and inferiority are pure fabrications, false constructs that certainly appear in the world and undoubtedly have real-world consequences, but that fundamentally lack intrinsic existence. However, when one person yields to another person, both parties are inclined to believe in the false hierarchy that has been established. And in doing so, both fail to see that the one-up person's superiority depends entirely on the compliance of others, which points to its inherent fragility. It's like a Jenga tower. It stands as long as the blocks below remain in place, but when those blocks move, when you take one of those blocks out, the entire tower, the entire edifice comes crashing down. In this way, your position of superiority exists only at my expense and only because I in some way allow you to believe yourself to be superior to me. But when I refuse to play along, then the empty, fabricated nature of your supposed superiority dissipates into the nothingness that it always was. And what's both fascinating and horrifying about this is that false power, because it's out of sync, out of step with reality, it's always threatened by reality itself. This creates a desperate need in the one-up person to reinforce their fundamentally fragile position, which explains why abusers escalate, why perpetrators go on perpetrating, and why those with control seem to always need more of it. I think that the Stanford prison experiment, for all of its various flaws, does provide a stark illustration of this. The students cast as guards started relatively neutral in their behavior, but became increasingly hostile and abusive. Not because they were inherently cruel, they were chosen at random, but because their need to maintain control intensified as their authority became more established. The more they exercised control and gained it, the more they feared losing it. Their actions therefore escalated in cruelty in an effort to preserve the illusion of power that they were enjoying. They needed to ensure ongoing submission, which led to escalating displays of violence, or, following Aquinas, escalating displays of sin. Not to mention, entitlement breeds entitlement. Delusions of grandeur fuel increasing levels of pride and arrogance, which provide further justification to control, threaten, and oppress. All of which corrupts the one-up person, sending them on a path that doesn't just ensure the destruction of others, that is obvious enough, unfortunately, but also the destruction of themselves, which is what Aquinas was trying to get at. Their self-destruction is a product of precisely that which their false superiority necessitates. Things like self-deception, because they can't afford to admit their profound vulnerability, their profound reliance and dependence on others in order to maintain their false superiority. Things like repression. Again, they must reject in themselves any sign of weakness, any sign of inferiority, of inadequacy, of their own vulnerability. All of that would run counter to their carefully constructed, ultimately empty position of superiority. And they end up paranoid, living in a state of paranoia, because they have to be on continued lookout, constant lookout for anything that would threaten their fundamentally fragile position. Indeed, when we look at history, we can find all types of examples of rulers, dictators, abusers who ended their lives trapped by their own delusions, consumed by their fear, tormented by paranoia, terrified of betrayal. Furthermore, their inability and unwillingness to acknowledge their vulnerability ensures that they never enjoy a heart-to-heart relationship with another human being. They can never relate genuinely to another person. Human relationships become entirely transactional. People are no longer anything close to subjects in their own right, but are simply reduced to mere tools, obstacles, or threats. In my own work as a clinician, many of the one-up people that I've worked with, well, they do eventually have a wake-up call. But often that wake-up call comes too late. It's once their children have turned their backs on them, once their spouses have left them, and then they look around to find themselves surrounded by stark, silent solitude. So these types of individuals don't just end up consumed by paranoia, but completely, devastatingly alone. To bring this full circle, what Aquinas is pointing us towards, what he's trying to tell us, is that the ultimate act of love and courage is not compliance, it's not submission, it's outright refusal. His profound insight is that rejecting false power isn't just about protecting yourself, though it certainly is, but it's also about protecting those who would wield the power too. As he sees it, or as I think he sees it, the ultimate act of love and wisdom and courage is to step out of the dynamic entirely. It's to refuse to participate. It's to remove your Jenga block. Because resisting the dynamic from within the dynamic just serves to feed and fuel the dynamic, and complying feeds the illusion. It is only via absolute refusal, via quiet and unwavering rejection of their bid for false power, false superiority, that the delusional dynamic dissolves once and for all. The beauty in walking away is that you don't just ensure your own safety and survival, but you might be saving them too. You save them from the sin that they would have, that they want to walk into. You save them from destruction of others. You save them potentially from their own self-demise. So that's my take on what Aquinas meant when he said that to submit is to invite another person to sin. If you see it differently, I'd love to hear your take in the comments below. And please do feel free to like and subscribe. It would be wonderful to have you be a part of this community. Have a great day. Talk soon.